Alright, let's do this one more time. Earthworm Jim is a game franchise that was started in 1994, and it had a whole lot of media and was popular and still has a cult following to this day. Okay, maybe not like that. And today I'm going to be covering the Earthworm Jim iceberg.
But wait, didn't you do that already?
Yes, I have, but before we continue on the iceberg, this iceberg contains some entries from the original one. I did a video on it last year ago, but this new one, which was made by me and TomtheIronman, includes a bunch of new entries and things to talk about. But also at the same time, I'll be correcting some of the mistakes I made in the past while also covering some of the entries again. Since in that video, some of it is outdated now. With all that out of the way, let's continue on with the Earthworm Jim Deluxe Edition Iceberg, which was made by TomtheIronman, shout out to her, while also with the help from me with some of the entries and some of the artists in this video, and the guys who made the franchise. Basically, just be thankful. If you don't know what an iceberg chart is, in a nutshell, it's basically a chart full of lists and facts about a certain topic. The higher layer being the most known things, and the deeper you go, the darker unknown it becomes. Without all out of the way, let's get started. Earthworm Jim 1. This was the first game to be made in 1994, but mainly this entry is referring to the plot. The plot in the game is that a cybernetic spacesuit is made for the evil Queen Sug for a butt, until it ends up being stolen, only for it to crash on Earth where it lands on a normal Earthworm, turning it into Earthworm Jim. Jim ends up liking his new powers and hides from Psychro, yes, that thing with the fishbowl in its head, and Psychro talks about a princess in distress, which then leads him on going on a quest to save the princess what's-her-name. And the game did incredibly well and got multiple good reviews and awards. Doug TomtheIronman. Doug TomtheIronman is the man who created the character Earthworm Jim. He's known for other things like Cat Scratch, Bigfoot Bill, Skull Monkeys, and Neverhood. Fun fact, he also did an episode of Adventure Time known as Son of Mars. We will talk about him more later in the iceberg, but enjoy the sunshine while it lasts. TomtheIronman comic reboot. In 2019 through 2022, Doug TomtheIronman would make a comic reboot of Earthworm Jim, with two books known as Earthworm Jim Launch the Cow, Earthworm Jim Fight the Fish. These two did very well, minus a few things from it. But it's unknown if he may or may not do another book in the future, but there are plans for a 5-book arc with Jim. Beyond the Groovy. This was the name of another reboot, this time for the TV show, known as Earthworm Jim Beyond the Groovy. It was announced in November of 2021, and said to be released by 2022, but that didn't happen, as it's currently 2023. Unless you somehow glitched to a universe where 2022 and the show did come out, it being handled by a new group known as Circus Studios, who actually was there since the very beginning, and Passion Pictures. But there has been no updates about this series, and it's most likely cancelled. Earthworm Jim 2. Earthworm Jim 2 was the second entry in the franchise. It was released just 1 year after the first game. It was received well and also introduced a lot of new things, but anyways, the plot of the game is that after Queen Sug for a butt dies, Sucker discovers that since she's dead, if he marries Princess What's-Her-Name, he could rule the universe, so he ends up kidnapping her for a forced marriage in a shotgun wedding. As Jim must stop it. I know, an interesting story. Earthworm Jim 3D. This was the third installment of the series, and the plot follows more of the TV show than the game, and it's about Earthworm Jim getting hit by a cow and a fridge, or the N64 logo, and he goes into a coma where the whole game takes place in his brain. This came out in 1999 and 2000, and well, I'll let you see. Interplay. Interplay is or was a gaming company that made video games, mainly known for Clay Fighter and Fallout 1 and 2. They were the ones who made Earthworm Jim 3D, as Shiny members weren't involved with the game, while also being the main reason why Earthworm Jim franchise has died. And nowadays they just focus on NFTs, and we'll talk about that later in the iceberg. Playmates Action Figures. Playmates was that company that helped fund Shiny Entertainment as they wanted a new mascot to make money off of, like they did with Ninja Turtles. And they also did a line of action figures based off of the TV show and Earthworm Jim, and also helped make the Earthworm Jim game. And we will mention them later in the iceberg again. And they even made a mail order exclusive action figure that is going for totally reasonable prices. Totally.
That's gotta hurt!
Cow. Every Earthworm Jim fan knows what this means and how it originates from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But if you don't know, in a nutshell, cows are always in a series. The first game, it's launched. The second game, there's a whole level with them. with the TV show, it ends with them falling on someone or something. And Earthworm Jim 3D, the cows are in the plot as enemies, characters, and golden others. And beyond grouping, we have a bull! Mike Deeds. Mike Deeds is one of the main animators who worked on the first 2 Earthworm Jim games, and also was part of the team that made the video game adaptation of Disney's Aladdin, the Genesis one, not the SNES one. Shiny Entertainment. Shiny Entertainment was the name of a company that originally created Earthworm Jim. It was created by a group of ex-Virgin Interactive members, LOL, who all left to do their own thing that eventually became Shiny Entertainment. Dan Castanella. Dan Castanella is an American actor that's famous for many roles, mainly his role as Homer Simpson from the Simpsons series. He also did the voice of Earthworm Jim for the TV show, Earthworm Jim 3D, and Clay Fighter 63 1/3. Tommy Tallarico. Tommy Tallarico is the, music composer? Music composer? Music composer? Did the Earthworm Jim soundtrack. His mother is also very proud. Dave Perry. Dave Perry is the founder of Shiny Entertainment's members, and worked on other games like Wild 9 and MDK, with a few things about him we'll mention later in the iceberg. Steam and GOG releases. The 3 main games were re-released onto Steam and GOG, Good Old Games, store, and the re-release of Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 are the MS-DOS versions that alter and remove a couple things. The Steam version of Earthworm Jim 3D is terrible due to it missing sound and sometimes has other issues. And also, false advertising! Genesis Mini and Nintendo Switch Online. The second Genesis version of Earthworm Jim 1 was also released on the eShop of the Nintendo Wii and Nintendo Switch Online store, and also the Sega Genesis Mini, while for the SNES version of Earthworm Jim 2 was also released on the Wii Store and Nintendo Switch Online, and the Sega Genesis Mini 2 had Earthworm Jim 2, but not the Super Nintendo version, but only the Genesis version. Mini, you cannot swap your weapons. Michael Kolsch. Michael Kolsch is a person who did the art cover for Earthworm Jim, and also in 2021 did a World War propaganda style Earthworm Jim art. He also is known for 60s-ish styles of art, and even did an M&M's ad. Rocket Worm. Rocket Worm is one of the many fan websites that was made for Earthworm Jim, and this one contains things like the Marvel Comics, sub-manuals, and even a timeline of the video game development history. Jimcord. The Jimcord is the name of unofficial Earthworm Jim Discord server. From what I could tell from this is just your normal Discord server, but with Earthworm Jim stuff. And this is apparently the place to go to get your current Earthworm Jim info. Or just ask Reddit/Earthworm Jim. Dever Comics. These were little comics done in the UK around 1995 and 1996 with only 5 issues, and the 6th one being cancelled. And there was also scans out there of the 6th one, but also at the same time there were scans of the comics, but finding a copy of these comics are a bit pricey since sites like eBay don't really have them. Menace to the Galaxy. This was the name of a Game Boy Color game that was made in 1999. This game didn't really see that much attention, but I think that's for the best. HD/DS. In 2010, an HD version of Earthworm Jim 1 that was made by Gameloft was released. It had a couple of changes like cutting and removing a couple things from the original while also adding new things. And there also was a DSi version that was almost similar, and also an iPhone version, but we don't talk about that one. Marvel Comics. In 1995, Marvel Absurd, who's known for the licensed comics like Beavis and Butthead, made 3 Earthworm Jim comics. These are extremely valuable, with the first issue being worth a lot. What are worms/You're the Best? In Earthworm Jim Special Edition, if you beat the game on the hard mode, you will unlock a special ending where Doug Snaple congratulates the player for beating on the hardest setting, and if you beat it on easy, you get a totally 100% accurate biology lesson. Jim plays the accordion. This is just referring to how Earthworm Jim plays the accordion in Earthworm Jim 2 and in Earthworm Jim 3D. Something says he might like Polka. Honeydew ship. This is one of the few Earthworm Jim ships that exist. This one originating since the cartoon, and the name's coming from a Tumblr user, Perry Loon Pirate. The only known voice actor for Earthworm Jim 3D is Dan Castanella. In Earthworm Jim 3D's credits, the throat talent aka cast, the only one they put is Dan Castanella, who is known for Earthworm Jim 3D. But thanks to the TV show, we know that Psychro and Bob are voiced by Jim Cummings, and Professor Monkey for a Head is voiced by Charlie Adler. Before Fatty Roswell, many people speculate that it's Jim Cummings who voiced him, and for Earthworm Jim, there's one fan theory that suspects that she was voiced by Linda Wallum, who was famous for many characters that she voiced, one of those being Doc Hutchison from Rocko's Modern Life. Take a listen to how they both sound.
Remember, Jimmy, it's for your own good.
Here's your problem. These little lightning bolts indicate pain. Oop. Good conductor.
Intestinal Distress. This is the name of a level in the first game that has Earthworm Jim going in the intestines of something to fight a boss named Doc Duodenum, who may or may not be an intestine. The development story of this level is that when the game was almost finished, Sega asked for an exclusive level in exchange for cartridge cost, so they made that level for the game, and it's only present in the Sega Genesis, CD, Windows 95, and HD version and DSi versions of the game. And no, it wasn't cut from the Super Nintendo version because of blood and gore. But weirdly enough, it's in the GBA version, despite that being a port of the Super Nintendo version. Jim sleepwalks. In 2019, Teddy Root 12 made a post saying that how her headcanon is that Earthworm Jim sleepwalks, which then Doug Tenable tweeted back true, meaning that this is canon. German dub has localized text. The German dub of the show actually has localized text, meaning that the title cards and other things similar to that are all in German. Russian fandom. The Russian fandom is somewhat quite big, with a lot of other things we accomplished together, as we'll talk about them later in the iceberg, on what they've accomplished, and their main fandoms is located in VK Archive. No Hopers. In DKC2, there's a few references to Earthworm Jim, but not in a good way. Some of them are harsh, like the first one being a question about the enemies, and one of the answers being a filthy earthworm. And in the second one being a book held by one character saying something about making a worm pie. And the final one is when the Cranky Kong's video game hero screen, there was a trash can in the right corner saying no hopers with Sonic shoes and Earthworm Jim's plasma blaster. We will explain why this might be later. June 9th. In the game show part of Earthworm Jim 2, one of the questions is about Earthworm Jim's birthday, and the answer is June 9th. That being of the character's birthday, not when the game was released. Which, this is almost a holiday in all of the Earthworm Jim fan-based community, where fans celebrate this day. And yes, this means Earthworm Jim's birthday, in numbers, is 6-9. Had to hide the 6-9 joke. Seriously, Tenaple? Seriously? Turlock is based off of Turlock. It's no surprise that Turlock, the town in the TV show, and the Doug Tenable books are based off of the real-life town in California, Turlock, which has a few similarities, with them almost being identical layouts of the houses, and farmers and farming community, and stuff. But there's also a few other things that are in Turlock. Contest. There are 3 contests that were made during the 90s. The first of these contests was a worm eating contest. In an issue of Game Informer to promote Earthworm Jim 2, they sent a reader a candied lollipop with a worm in it, and they had to take pictures of them eating it. The second one was a drawing contest where whoever drew the best boss fight would win an animation cell as first prize. Second prize would be copies of Earthworm Jim on Game Gear and GB, and the last prize would be just a subscription at a service that they were reading. And the last one was one for Australia for the VHS copies, where the reward would be somewhat a set of action figures that were complete, and it's unknown if anyone won any of these or if there were any other things. But these are the only contests we know. GBA version. There's a GBA version of Earthworm Jim 1 and a GBA version of Earthworm Jim 2 that were, well... They're pretty terrible. The origin of why this happened was because the first one was rushed and didn't have the original code, while the other one was outsourced to a Russian company, explaining why these 2 games felt really rushed and extremely broken. Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim is the final boss of Earthworm Jim 3D. She is Jim's feminine side of his brain who wants to take over his mind, and wants to spend all his money. And yes, you heard me right, that is true, right there. Also, a lot of fans have made fan theories about her since she's one of our favorite characters, and we'll explain why later in the iceberg. An Apple Dad. This was a promo Playmates made for the first game, showing the game off in its beta stages, as there's actually a lot of stuff in this that was cut. And there's also several promo images of Earthworm Jim holding an apple, looking disgusted, realizing there was an earthworm in it, and let's check out the extra references at the beginning of the book, which is sorta cool. Taco Bell and Hardee's toys. In 1995, Taco Bell made toys that promote the TV show at the time, and Carl's Jr., or known as Hardee's, also made toys around the 1997, with theirs being more rare and expensive. 2 Russian dubs. There are 2 Russian dubs for the TV show in Russia. The original Russian dub and the Russia redub that they did. Big Broody was another exclusive level in Earthworm Jim 1, this time in a special edition copies of the game, that being of the Sega CD in Windows 95. This level has Earthworm Jim going through a shed-like area with what I'm assuming is mosquitoes, and using a frog, a lizard, a dinosaur, named Broody that could be manipulated to help out the player. This level was obviously named after Nick Broody, who was the art director of the game. Japanese fandom. Just like the Russian one, there also was a Japanese fandom. That one does exist, and it's kind of interesting. Only a few pieces of Earthworm Jim media made it there, and a lot of similar things were made there. But that's basically that. Rhythm Nation and Terminator sampled. Rhythm Nation is a song that was made by Janet Jackson. The song ended up being sampled for New Junk City's theme, as the chime sound in the background sounds like the one from its theme. I'm obviously not playing it for copyright reasons, but... And for the Terminator, there is a single Hey from the police shootout scene that was sampled for Andy Asteroid's Victory theme, and it's not a Problems theme. Sailor Jim. This was a meme that was made back then about the popular and still popular 1990s anime Sailor Moon, where in the show there's a sphere frame that resembles Earthworm Jim, and many people would make edits of it saying it looked like Earthworm Jim, or even make Earthworm Jim look like Sailor Moon. If only we could have a Sailor Moon style Earthworm Jim suit transformation, that would be nice. Earthworm Jim cosplays. When it comes to cosplays, there are some characters that are easy to cosplay as, while for others, it's difficult. And as for Earthworm Jim, it's one of those. Half of these cosplays looks cursed, and myself has cosplayed Earthworm Jim several times. 30 ants. Well, in the UK to promote Earthworm Jim, let's just say they, I'll just play the clip from one of my videos.
Maybe if you didn't play with that worm.
Protect your worm from the evil push handheld game in the world. Now you can play with your worm and whips and chains excite you. Get some hand relief.
Banned Granny ad. There was an ad for Earthworm Jim on Super Nintendo that had an old granny tell the story of Earthworm Jim as she ate a bowl of earthworms. This ad was pulled from television for being disturbing, and Dave Perry defended it, saying that it contained nothing sexual in it. But I can't blame him. Yet again, we are talking about an era when Yoshi's Island used the commercial of man eating and blowing up to promote the game. What a wacky area. I love it. Boogerman Lost Episode hoax. On April 1st of this year, there was a Twitter post talking about that there was a supposed lost episode of Earthworm Jim that had him have a crossover with Boogerman, who was another video game character. This was obviously a joke since it was April 1st and it was made by Raccoon Junkyard. Earthworm Jim bootlegs. There's a couple pirated bootleg copies of Earthworm Jim ranging from different countries. Some of these are Famiclone bootlegs or NES bootlegs in the most common words. The most famous ones are Earthworm Jim 3, which is basically just an NES version of the first Earthworm Jim, and Happy Bicky, which is the same thing as Dat, but they just changed the sprites. Jim's Hyper-Intelligent Brains meme. In 2021, oh no, not that year, there was a meme going around of a scene of the show with his hyper-intelligent brains where fans would edit it, the most famous one being this.
I'll solve this problem with my 4 hyper-intelligent brains. I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm itchy.
Denver Queen Slug for a Butt interview. In the first issue of the Denver comics, there's an interview of Queen Slug for a Butt, where other than feat, they talk about her backstory and her accomplishments, you know, that being like taking over the world, enslaving multiple people, and destroying several planets. She mentions several famous figures that are known for either cruelty or brutality. Yikes. HD multiplayer. And Earthworm Jim HD actually had a multiplayer mode for the game that adds certain areas from the original game but made them bigger for multiplayer experience. We'll talk about this way later in the iceberg again for a certain reason. It's basically 4-player multiplayer with Earthworm Jim that are different colors. Nintendo Power board game. In an issue of Nintendo Power, there is a section that the reader can cut out for a board game, and it contains 2 games. And these 2 games are actually not that bad. Dumb Cow Game contains no MSG, thankfully, and basically it's a 4-player game where the main goal is to get to the shed. The second one is Jim Flipper, no, not Flapper, and this one is your stereotypical match game, but if you get the Psycho card, you lose too. And after all, this was a fun Earthworm Jim board game you could play with your Earthworm Jim friends, or your anime friends you're trying to get into Earthworm Jim with. Spanish and Russian hacks. These are Spanish and Russian hacks of the game that obviously changed the language of the game from English to either Spanish or Russian. You're welcome. I say trans right is human rights, baby. When Earthworm Jim Beyond Groovy was announced, there was a post talking about how Doug Snaple wasn't going to be on board for reasons, more on that later, and also mentioning how Earthworm Jim would stand out as a transgender icon, because of several fan theories we'll talk about later on the iceberg. And there's a conversation that kind of played out like this. Hey Jim, great to see you back. What are your views on trans rights? I say trans rights are human rights, baby. Comic edits. This was another Earthworm Jim meme, this time of either the Denver Comics or Launch the Cow, where they change and edit into some funny things. Battle Arena Torshinden. In the PC version of the 1995 game with the same name, aka the game with the old man with a fish up his nose, Earthworm Jim is actually a playable character that's hidden, and reuses some of the moves that Rungo Iron uses. We will explain why later in the iceberg. Clay Fighter 63 1/3 and Clay Fighter 64, Earthworm Jim along with Boogerman appear as playable characters. This is because Interplay had the rights to those games. Games Done Quick. On the classic Games Done Quick website, Earthworm Jim was the original banner back then. MDK. MDK was one of other Dave Perry's creations, and in MDK there is a hidden room known as the Earthworm Jim Room, and has some interesting things in there. Sonic for Hire. Sonic for Hire was an animated series on YouTube made by Lowbro Studios and had Earthworm Jim as one of the main characters, which is kinda groovy, but kinda strange at the same time. Robot Chicken. Not to be confused with the Mech Chicken from the first game, this is referring to the Adult Swim series Robot Chicken. In one of the skits they had Earthworm Jim and Evil Jim fight. This, in my opinion, has to be one of the more tamer skits in the show has to offer, since a lot of them are either bizarre or violent. Cancelled Boogerman reboot. In 2013, there was a Kickstarter for a Boogerman reboot. One of the plans was having Earthworm Jim as a playable character, making a co-op, but this sadly didn't make its goal, so it was cancelled. Cat Scratch. This is one of Doug Snaple's other creations back in the 2000s, and there's a small little reference to Earthworm Jim in the show.
Intestinal distress. Abdominal discomfort caused by vapors such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen, and methane. Intestinal distress.
Enter the Gungeon. This is the name of a game that came out on Steam. One of the guns is named Heck Blaster, and its description says, quote, used by a wiggly hero in the early days of the Gungeon, and if you couldn't tell from the looks, it resembles Earthworm Jim's Plasma Blaster. Sacrifice. Sacrifice is one of Shiny Entertainment's other games, which by the way, googling it is extremely hard, and it had a character named James in it who looked a lot like Earthworm Jim, and I may or may not made a meme about it. Seventh Seal. In one of the episodes of the TV show, there's a scene where Professor Monkey for a Head and the Grim Reaper play chess. This is a reference to that film. Wizard of Oz AU. Well, this one isn't really an AU, it's just an episode where they basically recreate the story of the classic film, but with Earthworm Jim, and according to the cast, it takes place in an alternative dimension. Rat Fist. This is one of Doug Staple's other creations that was sorta meh. Anyways, in the story, there's basically a scene where the main character meets Earthworm Jim, and that's basically it. Dune. There's a couple references to the Dune series. In the TV show, Peter says to quote, I must not fear, fear is the mind killer, quote. And also in Beyond Groovy, there's a line where Jim mentions something about the Arrakis worms.
I will not comment about those Arrakis worms from Dune. Come on, man.
But also at the same time in Fight the Fish, the whole story revolves around the fear is the mind killer quote. Bigfoot Bill. This was another franchise that Snapple did. Basically, this comment was the equivalent of him being, if I can't have the rights to Earthworm Jim, I guess I'll make my own version of him, until Interplay gave him the rights for the book. Mad Cameo. In the Cartoon Network version of Mad, they had a skit known as Diary of a Kid Icarus, and it had Earthworm Jim for one scene. For one scene! And nothing else happens, he's just there for just one frame of the show. Seriously? Asterix and Obelix XXL2 Mission Las Vegas. In the game, other than there being a bunch of other references to video game characters and other video games, there is a room that's full of Earthworm Jim references that's just full of just tires and cow signs. Also, cow signs are real. Psycho. Believe it or not, there's a lot of references to the 1960 slasher film Psycho, mainly in the beta version of Earthworm Jim 3D. In one of the earlier versions of Porkboarding, there's a level that was going to be a bathtub with curtains and knives, and there's obstacles. This is a reference to the iconic and famous shower scene. And also there's an unused character in the game known as Rabbit Rabbit, who is described to be a giant rabbit, possibly made out of metal with a scooter, and who acts like Norman Bates, who is the main killer in the film. Donkey Kong cheat. So remember how I mentioned DKC2 and there's a lot of references to Earthworm Jim? Well, that all started with Earthworm Jim Special Edition, where in that version of the game, there was a cheat code that gives Earthworm Jim new appearances. If you click down C, B, A, 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 B, C, B, A, 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 B, C, according to many sources, it gives Earthworm Jim Donkey Kong's head with an arrow through it. And to remind you, DKC 1 and Earthworm Jim 1 came out around the same time, and they also got multiple rewards for being good games, and that might explain why they have a hatred over a worm that sounds like Homer Simpson, and a Donkey Kong that's a Kong. Game Center CX. This was a Japanese series where they play video games, and one of these episodes actually had Earthworm Jim. The thing about it is that Earthworm Jim was never released on Mega Drive in Japan, but was only released on Super Famicom, which was cool. Crystal Method. In certain pirated copies of Earthworm Jim 2 on PS1, in the Anything But Tangerines level, there's a certain track they play called Crystal Method. I'm not gonna play it for copyright reasons, but it kinda sounds interesting. With a lot of beats in it. Earthworm Jim 3D Beta. There's a small rabbit hole about the beta version of Earthworm Jim 3D, since that game did have a huge development hell. There was meant to be a lot of things in the game. Examples would be over 6 worlds in the game for the player to explore, and around 35 levels, where in the final game we only just got 4 worlds and 10 levels. A bunch of weapons that were meant for the game, but all of this was cut from the final product, and we'll explain some of the reasons why later. Latin-Spanish dub. The Latin-Spanish dub was a unique case. It was barely advertised and was only received very well, but it became lost. There was an active team looking for it, and only 11 episodes have been found so far. Brazilian dub. There was once a Brazilian dub for the show that once aired but was lost until it was all found by pirated DVD copies of the show, which is crazy to hear how that happened and makes me question it. How and what? No sequels. Around the mid to late 90s, Dave Perry wanted to get his feet wet and make new games that weren't Earthworm Jim, and decided to make a new rule known as no sequels, meaning they couldn't make sequels for games, in this case Earthworm Jim. So they decided to sell them to Interplay, and to this day, Dave Perry regrets doing this move. Amico Jim 4. In 2018, Tom Tallarico announced the Intellivision Amico, which was meant to be a new family-friendly console that had Earthworm Jim 4 as one of the main games in it. And other people made videos talking about why it was cancelled. Even I did one, go check that out. In a nutshell, it was a huge scam and a lie, and like I said before, Earthworm Jim will never happen, but it might happen for the fans at least, just not for Interplay. Portuguese dub. This one's an interesting story. This dub only had 2 episodes that were found so far, as it was aired on a live show called Batoon, and is most likely lost. There was even controversy about the show, where it's speculated that on March 15th, 2002, the show was abruptly cancelled due to disagreements between Antonio Branco and Paulo Glaimi, promoting the later leave the program. Rumor has it that the episode was meant to air on that day was broadcast. Several users online have claimed to have seen the episode on that day, stating that it had arguments between Branco and Gloomy leaked into the show, communicating in both hosts insulting and beating each other live, causing panic in the audience, with kids crying or covering their eyes. TV then cut off transmission as the station worsened. It's not known if this actually happened. Cartoon Test Pilot. In 1995, they made a test animation to demonstrate how they should be drawing Earthworm Jim. For many years, this pilot was lost media until 2022, it was found and uploaded to YouTube along with a bunch of other pilots. If any lost media people are watching this, please find a Me and My Friends pilot. PS2 Jim 4. Around 2003, there were plans for a 4th Earthworm Jim game for the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. This was cancelled for some unknown reason, but there's a few concepts that do remain in this game. My theory on the reason why it was cancelled was because Interplay would rather work on something like Fallout, and instead of that worm. And then later, he became the stepchild of Interplay. Unproduced toys. So around 1996, there were some plans for a second wave of Earthworm Jim action figures, and they included new variants of some of the Earthworm Jim figures, but also the villains from the series, like Queen Slug for a butt and Professor Monkey for a head, and some vehicle accessories like the pizza tosser, the worm tosser, the craze cycle, which was from the TV show, and there's 2 other that people have never heard of, which is the Plasma Blaster and the Cycro Bike. Prototypes of these do exist, but are expensively rare. cut levels from Earthworm Jim 2. There's a few early levels of this game that were removed and cut from the game. The most famous one is Fat Jim. Fat Jim would have had Earthworm Jim in a fatter version of his suit. This level was cut due to cartridge limitations. The other ones that we'll be mentioning is Breakout, which was meant to be a mini-game in Earthworm Jim 2 based off of the game with the same name. And there was also meant to be a different take on Inflated Head that was meant to be a roller coaster ride, more on this later. And in See Jim Run, it would have been a cathedral instead of a whole race. Jim X Psychro. This is another Earthworm Jim ship. At the same time, it's for Earthworm Jim and Psychro. This one is kinda safe for word, but also a little bit NSFW. At least it's not in the same vein as Ozzy and Drax. Shh. We'll talk about you another time. Earthworm Jim PSP. In 2006, there was a PSP reboot of the series that was planned, and it was in development. It was going to be like the old games, but with a few new areas that were going to be in it. It was around 70% complete, but it was sadly cancelled in 2007 by Atari for money issues. Jim is an asexual hermaphrodite. So back to the What Are Worms ending, there's a part mentioning how do earthworms reproduce asexually, meaning without the interest of other worms, and also because they can swap gender since they're hermaphrodites. And there's a text following saying that Earthworm Jim would like the princess as a friend. Japanese DS translation. So there's a Japanese translation of Earthworm Jim DSi with some really terrible Japanese translation. Here's a few examples, like Queen Whatever, Wild 9 bashing Jim. In an interview with Dave Perry about Wild 9, other than him saying that he finds Wex cooler than Earthworm Jim, yes, Wex cooler than Earthworm Jim. They also showed an image of Earthworm Jim getting a good punch in the face by one of the other characters from the game. And my equivalent, it's their way of saying this.
Just get out of here, you stupid, dumb animal!
Bulldog, 5, and Moon. So back to Beyond Groovy, let's talk about the new characters that are going to be Jim's crew. Instead of having such beloved characters like Princess What's-Her-Name and Peter Puppy, we instead have characters like Bulldog, seems responsible since bulls are part of the cow family, and 5, who is another earthworm. What kind of name is 5? He sounds like something I would make when I was a child, which I did! Most importantly, the best one of them all. The one, the only, Moon, who's clear to be the best out of all 3. Like, no joke, everyone in 2021 started to draw fan art and simp for this person. Like if they had a lifetime of simp sauce and Roxy's OnlyFans. Scarecrow. In a 1997 magazine about Earthworm Jim 3D, we'll talk about this in the next layer, there was one of the main villains that was meant to be in the game was known as Scarecrow, who is a scarecrow, but with a rocket launcher for an arm. It's unknown which era he would have been in, but it's unknown why he was cut from the game. I wonder if he had a brain. Clutch. Just like the last one, this is another character that was cut, this time for the action figures. He was kinda known since he was pitched for the Earthworm Jim action figures, possibly meant to be on a TV show, since Hamstonator, who was another character in the show, was also meant to get an action figure that was also cancelled. But it's unknown how Clutch would have been like in the series. 3D PlayStation port. There was originally meant to be a Sony PlayStation port of Earthworm Jim 3D that was in development at one point, but this was cancelled sadly. We do know that according to a press coverage of inside of a press kit, it states that the PS1 version was going to be released on September 6 of 1998, along with a few people saying the game was amazing in somewhat early versions of Earthworm Jim 3D. And if the 2 people that were helping me recover what was in this disc, thank you for your help. Italian dub. There was meant to be an Italian dub of the show, but was cancelled for some unknown reason. The only things that remain of this is the theme song made by Cristina Denanva, and the title of the dub would have been known as Jim La Strovime, which means Jim the Starworm.
Jim, 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 super trasformato, prendi e vai, grande, grosso più che mai. Jim, 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 sei il nostro alleato, un eroe molto acclamato.
Tenaple's views. Doug Tenaple over time has said his beliefs and views on things. I won't talk about them for obvious reasons, but for people that don't know, he's a rainbow crusher. Eden. Eden was the name of an NFT project Interplay made. They used Earthworm Jim to promote these NFTs, which mainly was the reason why Earthworm Jim Beyond Groovy was announced and made, just to promote these NFTs. And add more insult to injury, They ended up making Can of Dirt NFTs based off of the show, but most importantly, these cans of dirt resembled those from a fundraiser charity known as Mini Mart City Park. And this organization sells cans of dirt in order to, fundraise their parks. But Interplay, what they did was they basically stole an image from their can of dirt and claimed it as their own, profiting as an NFT, which I find this to be a very bad thing to do. Rule 34/63. It does exist for some reason, and Princess What's-Her-Name and Earthworm Jim are mainly the victims. I'm not going to go into detail about this as I'm trying to keep this PG-13. And you know those anime mouse jigs? Let's just say there is one of Earthworm Jim and oh fudge no! Selena dub censorship. In this dub of the show, there was some odd censorship due to them wanting to appeal to children since, the American market failed to do that. Some of these changes are the following: Snot being renamed to Sluggy, but not stolen, and Peter Puppy having a puppy-like personality, and they also got a female actor to voice him, to make him more puppyish.
Not stinking likely.
Tommy Tallarico didn't do any of the music. So remember how I said he was once known for the soundtrack? Well, yeah, that's a lie. In a nutshell, this year there was a huge discovery that turns out that Tommy Tallarico didn't do the soundtrack. In a nutshell, a man named Tony Benarch actually did the soundtrack. The easiest way for me to explain this is that basically he did the equivalent of telling someone if you could help them and they will help you a lot, but you don't give them any credit, but instead you take their work and say you did it all by yourself despite them helping you. So he basically didn't do the soundtrack, but at the same time we're almost close to finding the beta version of the Earthworm Jim 2 soundtrack. The alien helpers are racist Asian stereotypes. This one's talking about the alien helpers from Earthworm Jim 3D and the happiness level. If you know how Asian stereotypes look like, they mainly have stretched out eyes, bulky teeth, and carry a walk, and also make random sounds for no reason. And many of these are features that the alien helpers have in the game. PTSD and Fight the Fish. In Earthworm Jim Fight the Fish, there are several moments where Earthworm Jim starts to have flashbacks of Psycho biting him in half, and is sometimes in kind of a state of shock. How PTSD works is that the person has flashbacks to a moment in time where they had a traumatic event, that could range from assault or domestic violence. In this case, Earthworm Jim has some of those side effects that PTSD has. Jim peed in Windows 95 version. In the Windows 95 version of the game, if you click F10, you'll see Earthworm Jim pee? What the fuck? King of Beats by Medtronics and Earthworm Jim theme sampled in Fantasy theme. In Earthworm Jim 3D, the theme that they play in Fantasy is actually sampled from two dings in the background of the song. You can hear the siren, which is a sample from a song King of Beats by Medtronics. And you could also hear Jim saying groovy. It's the same groovy he says in the TV show theme. Christianity and Lan Chicao. There are several references in the story to Christianity and other religions, and one scene of the story, they all pray to God before eating, and Jim asks who God is. And Queen Sling for a Butt says, think atheism when Earthworm Jim dies, and there's also several references to atheism, like them using magic instead of using science like how they would in the real world. And also, I know this is not part of the entry, but they do show the USSR symbol in the background in one of the pages. Does anyone know how Doug TenNapel got away with this? Banned pull your worms for the birds ad. There was an ad for Earthworm Jim in the UK and it had this. You can already guess why this rose controversy and even had its own newspaper article talking about it in the UK. Earthworm Jim 3D development hell. The real reason why the game was stuck in development hell was spending around 2.5 years in development and originally being on PC before N64 and Sony PlayStation. They had a lot of concept in it that was planned for the fall of '98 release until they reworked the game again to make it similar to Mario 64, and some YouTubers did do videos talking about the development history of the game, but at the end, we got one huge mess of a game. Worm Milk Ship. This is the last ship on this iceberg. This ship is somewhat originates from Japan, and also it's of Earthworm Jim and Evil Jim. The fan art is sometimes really NSFW, almost to the point where it has a lot of SA. Cartoon fetish scenes. In the cartoon, there are several scenes that can be taken as a fetish, like Peter cross-dressing and Jim begging for him to change back to what he was wearing, the amount of inflation, and Peter saying that he's not going to wear a dress for Pete's sake, and Jim dresses up as a flapper. HD stolen fan art and bubbles from Finding Nemo. In Earthworm Jim HD, the HUD icon is literally stolen from a piece of fan art. And down the tubes, there is a fish in the background, is a frame of Bubbles from Finding Nemo. Takara ports. So remember how I said Earthworm Jim was in Japan, sorta? Well, that's because of a company known as Takara, which ported these games into Japan for the Super Famicom and Sega Saturn, which is why Earthworm Jim appeared in Battle Arena Toshinden. And also, for all my Japanese viewers and speakers watching this image of Earthworm Jim, he is not doing the concho pose. That is the bunny ears. What are you expecting? For him to run into Psycho and shove it up his 1997 3D plot. In a magazine for Earthworm Jim 3D, there was an interview about the game was going to be like, mainly the plot. And it sounds even crazier than what we got. Let me read it out word for word. Quote, with Liz trying to liberate the local zoo penguin's house from terrorists, as he do, Jim gets knocked unconscious and falls into a dream world. He finds himself stranded on a strange island with 9 deemed areas of personality. Athleticism, aspiration, dream, fear, fetish, greed, lust, memory, and finally, violence. Each of these areas is a different part of Jim's subconsciousness, and each is home to a supporting character that will return to the real world. Jim must conquer each area and list the supporting characters to help reactivate his mind console, just in time to stop the nasty terrorists from deactivating a thermonuclear device. You are all probably thinking, what the
Well,
of a story that would have been, and each area had a section that represents it, and some of these zones, like memory and fear, did make it to the final game, but all I want to say is, what in the name of Miki Matsubara would have been in lust and greed? We were given a few images of these areas, so it makes me question interplay's development of this game even more, like, how did they think of this? Was their game still in M-rated mode? I thought I was talking about Earthworm Jim, not Fallout 1! Plus cartoon dubs. With most dubs of the show, a couple episodes can be found here or there or anywhere, but there are a lot of dubs that have no traces of them anywhere. These dubs, at the time of this recording, are Croatan, Danish, Georgian voiceover, Greek, Hungarian, Malay, Swedish, Turkish, and Valencian. There's also an Arabic dub. Original Evil Jim design. There was some concept art of Evil Jim would have looked like. Originally, he was meant to be in Earthworm Jim 2 as a potential boss. There's concept art of him in the roller coaster level, and he has more of a shadowy and grittier look, kinda like Dark Rayman, but was later added to the TV show. Speaking of that, Hentra was also meant to be in Earthworm Jim 2 since he appears in many of the magazines of the game, meaning he might have been in the game but was pushed to the show. Nick Jones cheat. In the Super Nintendo version of Earthworm Jim 1, there's a cheat code where if the player types in a certain combination, it will cut to a screen of multiple faces of Nick Jones in different hairstyles. Nick Jones was one of the main people who developed Earthworm Jim. The show was going to have 65 episodes. In an early magazine talking about the show, it mentions that it would almost ran for a total of 65 episodes, but sadly we only got 23. That was because the show failed to reach a demographic that shows like Pokemon were getting, which was why the TV show and action figures were cancelled. Rebecca the Raven. This is the name of a dark parody of Earthworm Jim about a trans raven who suffers from PTSD, things like her girlfriend dying, homophobia, and transphobia, but fights a character known as the Grinning Worm before they find out they have stuff in common. Yeah, it's sort of interesting read if you're into dark parodies. Earthworm Kim was meant to be a love interest. According to some obscure sources, there was a rumor that in early development of the game, Earthworm Kim was meant to be Earthworm Jim's love interest before it was changed to her being his feminine side. It's unknown where this originated from or if it's true, but I would be interested in seeing this if it was true. Evil Jim was the original final boss of Earthworm Jim 3D. Just like the last one, this was another rumor that in an early version of Earthworm Jim 3D, Evil Jim would have been the final boss of the game. But this one doesn't have any proven things, minus the fact that he would have been in Earthworm Jim 2 and he's one of the bosses of Menace to the Galaxy. Like I said before, it would be interesting to see how this would have played out if he was the main villain. 3D debug menu. Several people have made videos and articles talking about this already, but in a nutshell, there is a debug menu in the game the player can access and do certain stuff in the game, like look around the map, go out of bounds, etc. And you can also get yourself every weapon in the game, which if you do this, you can actually get 2 guns that were cut from the game, that being the Flamethrower and Bubble Gun. Casual names for Princess What's-Her-Name and Queen Slug for a butt. In the series, these 2 are just called that, but there were certain times where they did have casual names. Like for Princess What's-Her-Name's, hers was Lana, and for Queen Sluggerbutt's, hers was Lucy, as in an episode of the show they do say that. Evil the Cat was the first character. In 1991, Doug TenNapel made a comic called They Call Him Evil, and it starred Evil the Cat. This predates Earthworm Jim by 2 years since the idea of the character would be made in 1993, and then they tossed in Evil the Cat, because of why not. Queen Sluggerbutt is actually a queen termite. Have you ever wondered what kind of bug Queen Slug for a Butt is? She looks like an ant, but maybe people say she's a slug because of her name. The real-life equivalent of Queen Slug for a Butt would be Queen Termite, which looks almost identical to her, which makes me now think if the Zerbs are also termites. Russian bootleg merch. So this one is kind of a crazy story. So in a nutshell, somewhere in Russia, believe it or not, there is Earthworm Jim vape juice. Yep, a vaping company there just decided to make a brand called Monster Jim and have Earthworm Jim characters on it. They even have gotten awards, and this is a vape convention with Earthworm Jim. Jesus, what is happening and what's next? Is there gonna be a Mexican restaurant called Earthworm Jim? Book of Doom deleted scene. In an episode of Earthworm Jim called Book of Doom, there was originally meant to be a part where they would have went through Psychro's brain. This was cut from the final version and instead had them where they were already there. TomtheIronman wanted Jim to die. In a Game Informer interview with Doug TomtheIronman, when the TV show came out, they said that Doug TomtheIronman actually wanted Earthworm Jim to die at one point and for him to throw a funeral, but they didn't allow him to do that. But it seems like his wish was somewhat granted, since in the TV show there's an episode where he actually does die by sacrificing himself, but the Great Worm Spirit brings him back to life for saving his life. And in Launch to Cow, there's a part where they do throw a funeral for Earthworm Jim's butt, but Earthworm Jim does die by sacrificing himself again, but comes back to life. And hearing this from TomtheIronman is kind of strange to hear that how he wanted this creation to die. The suit's battery. The battery that powers the super suit comes from the gods, and if you're wondering where the battery is located, well, let me just show you.
Have a look. Gods. What does it say on the battery? Like I said, God.
Who are the puppy's father/mother? So in Puppy Love, the puppies he saved are actually Peter's 600 children. All of them. But the real question is, if Peter's the father, who's the mother or father? Is it Earthworm Jim due to the many adult jokes around them? But guess what? The results are in!
In the case of Peter's 600 children, Earthworm Jim, you are—
How old is Peter? Despite his name being Peter Puppy, it's unknown if Peter is actually a puppy or an adult, as he doesn't act puppyish in the TV show, and also he has kids. Princess family issues. Princess What's-Her-Name's family is confusing. In the video games and TV show, Queen Slug for a Butt is her sister, and she was treated with royalty where Princess What's-Her-Name was locked up, making her have the urge to get rid of Queen Slug for a Butt. But also, in the reboots, Queen Slug for a Butt is instead her stepmother before she ends up meeting her actual parents. Does Princess like Jim? This is one of the oldest debates that some fans had if she likes him or not. Many fans believe that she likes him as a friend or, in a platonic way, but sometimes more than a friend in order to get Earthworm Jim to do her dirty work. But on the action figure box, it actually says that Earthworm Jim is, quote, kinda her boyfriend. And I know that she kissed him in the book, but that was just to get Earthworm Jim to snap out of it. So in conclusion, I think she likes him platonically, but with a twist of gullibility? I guess? Does Jim have a male private part? Who in the name of the mighty Jimmy thinks that? Please go outside and touch some grass! Jim's female part is seen in the HUD. So here's something if you didn't know in the first game, Jim's HUD icon looks like this, correct? And that ring around Earthworm Jim is actually the female part of the Earthworm. Alright, let's move on. Psycho's addicted to coffee. In the episode Hyper Psycho, Psycho drinks a special type of espresso, causing them to have powers, and also at the same time, I know this isn't part of the Earthworm Jim, but did you know that coffee addiction is an actual thing? And I think that Psycho may or may not have a coffee addiction. Everyone knows they're in a cartoon. This comes from the various times they break the fourth wall.
Hey, you don't look like the president.
I'm one of those generic presidents they use on TV to keep shows from becoming dated.
Jim went to rehab for 25 years. In Beyond Groovy's trailer, there's a part where Jim mentions going to rehab.
Now, just to be clear, I don't want to talk about my days in rehab, but it wasn't very long.
If you don't know, 2021 minus 25 will equal 1996. That was the year when the last season of the show was released, and it's unknown on why Earthworm Jim went to rehab. Mike Pilati died before Earthworm Jim 2. Mike Pilati was one of the members who worked on the original Earthworm Jim and died in an avalanche in 1995 before Earthworm Jim 2 was released. In the end of the game, after the credits, there's a part that does say in loving memory of Mike Pilati. And also, rest in peace to the person who helped to make Earthworm Jim. Lost Earthworm Jim movie. Back in 1995, there were several magazines mentioning a possible Earthworm Jim movie due to the game's success. And in an interview with Dave Perry about MDK, he said that they were once given an offer for a movie that would have been in 3D CGI animation, but they ended up rejecting the offer. Jim is trans theory. There's a fan theory that says that Earthworm Jim might be transgender for various reasons, since earthworms are hermaphrodites, those being that Earthworm Jim cross-dresses like a girl sometimes, and his biggest fear is public bathrooms. And also in Earthworm Jim 3D we have Earthworm Kim, and if you beat the game 100% you can actually play as her. Even though I think Earthworm Jim is gender fluid, since earthworms do swap genders, but in this case I can see why people think he's trans. Fatty Roswell and Earthworm Kim were canned villains from the TV show theory. There's a fan theory that suggests that Fatty Roswell was meant to be a villain in the TV show due to Earthworm Jim's TV show connections. And this one's sort of unknown, but there's beta screenshots that have been found of his diner. And for Earthworm Kim, it's kind of unknown, even though there is a image of Earthworm Jim with a wig that looks similar to Earthworm Kim's hair. Jim doesn't care about the Earth theory. This theory was because of the many times in the show where Jim chooses random objects over the Earth, like with the Book of Doom episode, where Earthworm Jim chooses to save a pop-up book.
And save the universe! Heck with the universe, I want my book back!
And also in the Denver comics, it's with a pot of gold. Everyone is a cow theory. At the end of Earthworm Jim 2, it reveals that everyone is actually cows wearing suits of the main characters, meaning that everyone might actually be cows and might be the main reason why there are cows in the series. But also, the cows falling on someone or something might probably be a way of punishment since they're trying to hide their true identity. Tapeworm theory. This originated from Twitter user known as Cruise Lane, and the theory is the entirety of Earthworm Jim 1 takes place in the human body. New Junk City being a mouth, and the asteroids being the esophagus, what the heck being the stomach, while Big Broody is the gallbladder, and Anti-Asteroids 2 being the unroarity track, down the tubes being a worm, Anti-Asteroids D being vomit, Snot Problem being a nose, Anti-Asteroids 4 being the nerves, Level 5 being a brain, while Who Turned on the Lights is the stupid part of that brain, Anti-Asteroids 5 being the arteries, For Pete's Sake being the heart, Anti-Asteroid 6 being the veins, Intestinal Distress being the small intestine, Anti-Asteroid 7 being the large intestine, and finally Buttville is the quote, 7th planet from the solar system. Peter Puppy is gay theory. Peter can be seen sometimes cross-dressing a lot in a cartoon, and sometimes Jim has been telling him to cross-dress sometimes, like in one episode in season 1, episode 6, where Peter says, "I'm not wearing the dress this time," or in season 1, episode 2, where Peter ends up swapping his outfit that looks more feminine while Earthworm Jim begs for him to change it back. And also at the same time, he has several mental breakdowns about Earthworm Jim. Like, so many of them. And there's also several adult jokes around the character with Earthworm Jim. The most famous one being the whipping joke that they say. Jim's hospital is trying to kill him theory. In Earthworm Jim 3D, if you read the text, it mentions that the nurse shakes his head. We don't know. Doing it to someone while unconscious or in a coma will kill them. And at the end of the game, we see Earthworm Jim holding flowers, which is commonly a trope associated with death. And gets another cow landing on him, meaning the cow has crashed through several floors and was pinned to the ceiling. Amnesia theory. I made a whole video about this with Miss Teddyroo, which will be in the link in the description. In a nutshell, the amnesia theory is that the whole game is actually Earthworm Jim suffering from amnesia, aka memory loss, since that will explain some of the non-canon stuff of the lore, like Earthworm Jim being in war, since it's possible for many people to have amnesia and most importantly, false memory and personality changes. And that possibly being the reason why Earthworm Kim does exist, and Jim must defeat her in order to live. Okay, let's go to the bonus layer now, since the bonus layer will contain some stuff that wasn't in the iceberg. Whip grab ability. In a magazine about Earthworm Jim 2, they mentioned that there was going to be an ability known as the whip grab, Basically, it would allow Earthworm Jim to grab objects by whipping them, and this was cut from the game for some reason. Manta Shield. In Earthworm Jim 2, if you click a certain button, Earthworm Jim will do a Manta Shield. It's supposed to block projectiles, but it's basically somewhat broken. And in the TV show, we see Earthworm Jim use the feature, but in the game it doesn't work. Earthworm Jim doesn't pay taxes. From the same magazine about the whip grab, it mentions that Earthworm Jim doesn't pay his taxes and that the IRS is after him. Yeah, that's basically it. Earthworm Jim is the height of Arnold Schwarzenegger. In the same magazine also mentions that Earthworm Jim is the height of Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you don't know, he's 6'2", and hearing that Earthworm Jim is the same height as Arnold Schwarzenegger is like hearing Dr. Maxis is allergic to peanut butter.
Something that we don't know about Dr. Maxis. Anything at all. Or give us some kind of...
He's allergic to peanut butter.
Oh wow, okay. I'm gonna have to take that, aren't I?
One-handed Earthworm Jim sprites. In the beta screenshots and footage of Earthworm Jim 1, there are several sprites of Earthworm Jim shooting with only one hand. In the series, it's confirmed that he's mainly two-handed with the Plasma Blaster, but I don't know why these sprites were cut from the game, as it looks like they were finished, but were just hardly used. Jim's Ski Slide. In Earthworm Jim 3D, there was once an unused track from the game known as Jim's Ski Slide. This was played in the beta footage in 1997 version of the game. There was meant to be a skiing level, so this might have been a theme for that level, but it does sound pretty groovy. Tenaple poked Bubsy in the eyes in E3 1995. Yep, this is real. Earthworm Jim mascot suit. In 1985, and during some events, there were images of Earthworm Jim in a suit. How do I know it's a suit? Because there are various poses and it being in multiple places. It's unknown where it's at to this day. Jim goes to court, and beyond groovy, and the only footage and audio we have, it seems like the first episode might have been about Earthworm Jim going to court, while the whole gang tries to get him out and defends him, since we do hear how Moon sounds.
Your Honor, I was just trying to chill, but Jim is a complete idiot.
But yet again, it's a good thing that this show never happened.
Your Honor.
Snot was the first pitch. Back then when they made Shiny Entertainment, the first idea they had was Snot, but they asked Tenaple to create an alien-like creature with the Wug cycle, and that later became Earthworm Jim, as Snot was repurposed to be Earthworm Jim's buddy throughout the games. SNES Down the Tubes music swap. In the SNES version of Down the Tubes, they actually changed the music with New Junk City theme. Miss Bleveridge is a lesbian. In Season 2, Episode 4, when Queen Stalkbarbut asks her if there's a Mr. Bleveridge, she says,
"Nah, I just use a missus to keep the men off,"
leading the fans to think that she's a lesbian. HD Whip Secret. If you play co-op on Earthworm Jim, there's this one feature where the player whips the other player. It will cause the suit pants to fall down, with quite a question to be why they made this feature for the game. Tremors 2 and VHS copy. The VHS copies of the show, there actually was a trailer for Tremors 2, which is kinda humorous since that film's about worms, and Earthworm Jim is a worm. Ha 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 ha. Monty Python reference in the TV show. You thought cows were the only things? Well, there's a reference to the scene of the movie with the thirsty women. And Earthworm Jim's sidekick episode, there's a scene where Earthworm Jim encounters multiple women who are into them, and are dressed exactly like the same women in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Cancelled Earthworm Jim fan games. Other than Interplay cancelling their Earthworm Jim games, or them sending cease and desist to fans who are making dedicated Earthworm Jim fan games, some fans tried making their own Earthworm Jim fan games. And one of them that was once being made by Alex Lucky Anovich, which was cancelled because of Earthworm Jim 4. Oof, that has to hurt. When one of them that was being made by Exenar, which everyone and myself were all hyped for since it looked and played like an actual Earthworm Jim game, was sadly cancelled this year. F in the chat for this, everybody. But at least other people are working on their own fan game projects. So if you're single like a pring, if you're wanting a new Earthworm Jim game, let's just hope some of these fan games happen. Invertebrate Retreat. This is a vocal cover of the Subterranean music that was made by Danny Branaskowski, Vig, and Zyko, that was featured in Earthworm Jim Anthology album. And it was about the downfall of Earthworm Jim from Jim's perspective. The lyrics are explicit. There are a few examples like, quote, "And now that hell is at its worst, I have no choice but to leave your dead corpse. No weapon of no kind to plea, and not even your substance abuse can bother me." Jesus Christ, these lyrics! For an Earthworm Jim song? Wow! Earthworm Jim Web Ring. Earthworm Jim Web Ring is basically the online fanbase of Earthworm Jim seen in the 90s, as they made their own Earthworm Jim fan sites. That's the end of this iceberg video, and also shout out to Teddy12 for help making this iceberg. Everyone go check out her channel. And also, thank you for watching this video, and also for 300 subscribers. I didn't expect to hit 300 subscribers, but thank you.